Hello, welcome back. I hope your time away has been wonderful and beautiful and kind, like all the things you can find in a Tarzan movie. It's a really good movie with a really good soundtrack. Disney really knows what it's doing with those movies. You all are going to have to forgive me. I completely slipped my mind that I didn't make a video for um, our lesson yesterday, which was on subversion. So we're going to talk a little bit about it today. I'm not going to try to hold you too long. I understand you all have need to do the readings and workshop. Also, you all really good comments on workshop thus far. I want to be clear. I'm not commenting on the threads. I'm doing one-on-ones, and so I've already had one of those, and it was really really good. And I can't wait to have the one-on-ones with you all and discuss your really really wonderful work. Um, Now to subversion. I called that particular lesson subversion because I talk kind of often about how in subversion is where, in the subversion of expectation is where the nuance and subtlety of humanity lies. The subversion normally comes from the peculiarities of life, and so we have in this essay by Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde is a black queer woman poet um, and writer uh, who was very, very influential and important in terms of her politics. She one of the people that coined the personal as political. Um, and yeah, she was the poet laureate, I think, of New York for a time, and just wildly important writer. One of those important writings is the uses of the erotic, and I like this essay, especially in context to what the, this particular class, because we already got what C.S. Lewis thinks of eros, right? And then we have what Audre Lorde thinks of the erotic. And it's interesting, right? Because the erotic is something that C.S. Lewis looks at as between the sexes, and then Audre Lorde goes into it being the erotic is something that derives from womanness, femininity, um, and so what do you think about that? She talks about it as the erotic is the knowledge and use of creative energy, right? So love, and so the erotic is something shared between any two people that doesn't necessarily have to engage with things like romance or sex, which I think is very very interesting. What I think is more interesting is how, and when we're talking about Eros in those particular stories, and I think about Etta Mae Johnson, I'm thinking about Eros as a utility to use possibly, right? So like towards getting a thing, as opposed getting a thing like stability and the being wanted. Also, Pat and Sam. This the Eros uses for stability for children, for longevity, for financial, possibly financial stability, and so on and so forth. Cultural significance. Um, but then we get the uses of the erotic, and that's interesting that we say use, because Audre Lorde goes on to say that use without consent of the used is abuse, which I think is very interesting because we get Pat and Sam each going into their relationship with wanting something for themselves, and what based off of this definition, or rather this statement from um, Lord in her essay, because they didn't disclose what they wanted each other for, because they and if one does not disclose, there cannot be consent, right? And so were they abusing each other? Um, if they were both using each other to a particular end, were they in an abusive? Were they abusing their love? Were they abusing the erotic? Um, I don't know. What do you think? Um, and moving on to page 90, Let's go do it. Let's go do it. I think about conventional, the safety of convention. Um, but what we see Lord asking us to do is to shirk off the convention for the grander possibility of what the erotic can offer. Offer like things like joy, unbounded joy, um, secure livelihood, life security, all these things. And she goes on to say, our erotic knowledge empowers us, becomes a lens through which we scrutinize all aspects of our existence, forcing us to evaluate those aspects honestly in terms of their relative meaning within our lives. And this is a grave responsibility, projected from within each of us, not to settle for the convenient, the shoddy, the conventionally expected, nor the merely safe. And I think that is so interesting because all through this essay, all of thinking was this: this is so scary. Allowing oneself to be free to the feeling, right? Like to feel a thing and saying, I get to engage in this. And it subverts the conventional. It subverts the convenient, which is form oftentimes gives it gives security. It gives a thing something one can cling to, which brings us to our work for today, which is the Duplex by Jericho Brown. Jericho Brown is a poet, and he in his book The Tradition this year won this year's Pulitzer Prize, and within that collection are 5 poems, each called Duplex, and the duplex is something that he created. And if you read the essay, of him talking about the invention of the duplex, you'll see that he created it because, as a black queer man from the South, he wanted something that contained or tried to contain all of these identities. Because throughout history, many of these things, in some form or another, seem to be in opposition towards each other. To be black and Southern is to be black in a place that was actively trying to kill you. To be queer and black, for some people, was a thing that was not real because blackness had this inherent masculinity. Masculinity is inherently is inherently homophobic, right, in these particular ways, right? So what does it mean to be a black queer man in the South? And so Brown he subverted the conventions of many historical forms, and so he put together the guzzle, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a form from the middle. Let me just look it up before I say. We'll let it go. The ghazal, which is Arabic, the sonnet, which was popularized by Shakespeare, right, and the blues, which was created in New Orleans. Blues and jazz were created in New Orleans, where Jericho is actually from. Where Jericho is from, Louisiana, and those things mesh and mold together. And so, in trying to find something that that combines the tradition of the poetic craft with the tradition of his life, right, his heritage, he created the duplex, which I think is just a brilliant, brilliant form. If we take a look at the duplex inside the essay, right? So you'll notice that each line is a repetition of another line. But as I told you all before, every poem has to have a turn. What's ingenious about this particular this form of poetry is that every line is a turn, even though every line is the repetition of another line. And so what we get with one line is actually subverted in the repetition of that line, which is just incredibly brilliant. And so, we're constantly on our toes, right? We're constantly, we're constantly alert. We have to pay attention. One has to pay attention, which I can even say, maybe, say for love and life, I think one of the most precious things one person can give another person is their attention. And this poem asks you to pay, this form asks you to pay attention. And so I'm going to ask you to pay attention by writing a guzzle. One of the poems, the other poem that I sent you, Duplex, and this was in the American Poetry Review. It begins with, I begin with love, hoping to end there. And I think this is actually a wonderful final assignment for us because, it has, I begin with love, hoping to end there. We began with love and we're going to end there. And I want you all to write a duplex beginning with that line. I begin with love, hoping to end there. Now, I want you all to write this tonight because we're going to have a form of sharing it, and I'll tell you about that tomorrow for tomorrow's assignment. But you won't have to write anything tomorrow. We're just going to have to do something with it. But, give it a shot. Subvert your expectations. Follow the language, right? What's cool about this form is that once you write a line, you got to write it again. And you're not in control of anything here. The language is in control. The poem is in control, and you must follow it where it will take you. Because I think that if we follow the impulses of our art, it will take us to a truth, the truth. Little t, capital T, I don't know. We'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. We'll see. All right. Anyway, you all, nice talking to you again. I shall talk to you all later. Love you. Bye-bye.